Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Steve Down. This is my guitar. We're in the middle of a lesson series looking at Wes Montgomery's D Natural Blues from his album The Incredible Jazz Guitar of Wes Montgomery. This is the 5th episode. We've looked at the head so far and the first 3 choruses. This week we turn up the heat and we look at Wes's octave solo. He's got 2 choruses where he takes a solo using octaves, and this is the first. The vocabulary that's used is fairly arpeggiatic and pentatonic scalic. There's nothing kind of wildly out there. But towards the end of this solo, the last 2 bars of the solo, it does get particularly fast. So this is where probably the bulk of your practice is going to go if you're going to try and replicate what Wes does. As always, my point with these lessons is to basically take what Wes is doing, unpack what he's doing, and give you tools to be able to use in your solo so that you can get creative with it rather than just kind of playing it as a party piece. So if you're new to octaves and these last 2 bars really do fox you, then don't be too discouraged. Just take what he's doing from it, and we'll get into that later, and try and use it creatively at a slower pace. So there's nothing that should turn you away from this solo if you're just starting to look at using octaves in your playing. Before we get into it, I just want to say a big thank you to my patrons. Thank you to Jeremy and Andy who joined last week and the week before. I'm sorry I wasn't here last week. I did put something up on the Patreon, Chitlins Con Carne, that was pretty cool for you guys to take a look at. Last week I was pulling up floorboards in my living room after having unexpectedly put my foot through a floorboard and realizing that I needed to change a whole load of boards. And with all of the sanding and just general manual labor, my hands were absolutely knackered by the end of the week. So I decided to rest them rather than make a video because I wanted to do a good job at this one. Thanks also to all of the people who have subscribed over the last couple of weeks, liked and commented on the videos. I really do appreciate that stuff. If you want to support the channel, then liking and subscribing is the best way of doing that. And if you want to support me in making more, then Patreon is the place to go to do that. The link is on the screen. And if you just want, you find something really cool in this video and you just want to give back something, but not do a subscription thing, because I know there's tons of subscriptions out at the moment, and they're all kind of like vying for your bank account, then just buy me a coffee. There's a link below where you can just buy me a coffee as a one-off thing. But even just watching this video and giving it a quick thumbs up is support enough for me. So thanks to all you guys who support. So let's take a look at the first couple of bars. So we've got this familiar thing back again that Wes does in the first bar, which is playing a major 7 or major 9 down a tone from the chord that's going on. The chord in this case is D7, and he's playing a C major 9 over the top of it, and that's this arpeggio. And what that does is that brings out all of the extensions. So you've got the flat 7 in relation to D, and then you've also got the 9, and then you've got the 11, and then the 13, and then he goes up to the 9 again, and another octave up, back down 13. So, and that's fairly tricky to get nice and clear at a fast tempo. I struggled with that when I was recording it as well, and it's something that I'm continuously practicing, trying to get octaves to sound clear. And octave technique is a difficult one. In our first video we looked really closely at it, so go back to that video if you want to get some in-depth knowledge about playing octaves. But just as an overview, the technique that you've got is a brush with the right hand across all of the strings, and that does create some problems because obviously you've got open strings, and we don't really want that. We want a nice, just those notes there. And so your left hand comes into practice here with muting. So your first finger kind of lays down, and, as well as pushing down on the string that you won on the 6th string. Your first finger is muting the top ones by just kind of being lazy and just laying on top of the strings. And your 4th finger is also doing some muting. Obviously your 4th finger is pressing down on the 4th string here, but it's also muting the 3rd string that's underneath it by just being a little bit lazy and not clearing it. And then for the top 2 strings, I'm just using the fleshy part of my 2nd and 3rd fingers, and they're just kind of laying on the string. But to be fair, your 1st finger will do the majority of the work. So as long as your 1st finger is being lazy across those strings, then you should be able to get a clear sounding octave in this case. And on these shaped octaves that are on the 4th and 2nd strings and the 3rd and 1st strings, then your 1st finger is doing the lion's share of the work. It's laying down, being lazy, as well as pushing down on the note that you want. And then your 4th finger is also catching with the fleshy part underneath, also catching that 1st string. And then to mute these bottom 2 strings, my 2nd finger just kind of stretches over, making sure that it's clearing the 4th string or 3rd string, depending on where your 1st finger is. But it's just muting and sitting on these ones here. So I can still brush across all of the strings, and it doesn't matter if I hit these ones at the bottom by accident. And that's kind of what you want. You want to be able to just kind of strum with your thumb, not having to think. So that's why you need all that muting technique there. But getting that at a speed is fairly tricky. So I would start with your click. Make sure it's on 2 and 4 so that you can kind of get a swing feel with it. Yeah, it's just one of those things that will take practice, unfortunately. There isn't really any secret knowledge to it, other than just sitting down with a click and just practicing and making sure that your octaves sound clear before you up the tempo. In the 2nd, 3rd and 4th bars, you've got some lateral motion using the pentatonic scale. So this is a really, really useful thing to do, is to practice your scales laterally up the neck. So that's going up the neck instead of going horizontally up and down the neck. And Wes is using that here. So you can see here with these notes at the top here, F and D, and then C and A. He knows his pentatonic scales up the neck, and that's really important for octaves. You absolutely have to know that for octaves so that you can move freely and create a decent melody. And so he knows his scales in a lateral way. So it's worth learning the D minor pentatonic laterally up the neck, which is this. And then we've got this really cool rhythmic thing that he does. And he's moving from D7 going to that 4 chord, G7. And we've got some mutes here. So all he's doing to create those mutes is just releasing the grip a little bit in the left hand. That's all that's happening. Just release the grip a little bit. But still make sure that you're covering those strings in the left hand, and then you're going to get that sound. And again, he knows his arpeggios laterally up the neck. So we can see that he's using here over the top of the D, he's approaching the 5th of the D7 chord, which is A, with just from a semitone below, creating this kind of cheeky line. And then just create a bit of tension, he just goes a semitone up. So up there. And then he plays the B, which is the 3rd of G, to spell out the chord that he's changed to, which is G7. So and then we've got a G6 kind of thing that he's playing here. And he kind of like, he goes straight. It's really swung up to that point, and then he goes straight here. Almost kind of like robotic, which is cool. It's like a nice little thing that he does just to kind of change up the feel a little bit. And, you know, I think, you know, when you've got these rhythmic devices in there where you're going between straight and swung, you know, that really does help your melody. So make sure you're doing some of that in your solo. Don't just play, you know, swing the whole time. Try a bar of straight, because it really catches the listener's ear. So in bars 6 to 8, we've got a really interesting thing, and it's quite difficult to explain, so hopefully this makes sense, and do message me if you want me to expand on it. Essentially, it's something called rhythmic displacement, and what he's doing is he's taking a phrase and displacing it across the bar. So rather than it being a phrase that occurs within an even number of beats, like 2 beats or 4 beats, he's done it within a beat and a half before starting the next phrase. So as you look on the screen, we've got a phrase here, the actual phrase that he's playing, and you can see that the rests actually are part of the phrase. It's not just the notes, and you can see that what you've got is a quaver, a dotted quaver rest, and then the note, and then you've got a semiquaver rest and the next note, and that's the phrase. And then that phrase starts again, another dotted quaver rest, and then a note, and then a quaver rest, and another note. And that keeps going, and if he kept that going, it would take 3 full bars of doing that same thing to get back to beat 1 again. If he did it where it was within an even number of beats, it would look like this, and it would sound like this: 3, 4, 1. Which is fairly boring sounding. So when he displaces it across the bar, then when he does this, then it creates a little bit of tension, which he then resolves with the I think this rhythmic displacement idea is a great thing to get into your playing, and you can start simply like Wes is doing by just using 2 notes. Try mimicking what he does, and then maybe try taking something, a different type of rhythm, and see if you can do it. It works really, really well in funk as well, because it just creates that tension that you can then resolve with a really nice line. So this next couple of bars, bars 9 to 10, look like this. And so the first thing he's doing is playing around with the 3rd and the 9th from an E-7 chord. So, and this is just something, this is fairly simple, but I just wanted to talk about how with arpeggios it's really important that you not just kind of go with all of the chord tones in order to spell out the chord, but you go with what's most important, which I think is the 3rd and the 7th. And quite a few educators out there will talk about the 3rd and the 7th as being the most important things, because you know, if you're playing an E minor chord, then the 2 notes are also shared with an E major. So the E and the B are both in E minor and also E major. So if you just play on E and B, then you're not really going to be describing the chord very well. It's the G that is the one that changes. So in a minor, it's a G natural, and in a major, it's a G sharp. So obviously, if we play a G sharp over this E-7 chord, then that's going to sound really out. So you have to describe it properly, which is what Wes is doing by playing that G. So the 3rd and the 7th are really, really important. Triads are so important, but the 3rd and the 7th are the most important notes within the chords, because they differentiate between a major and a minor chord. We've then got some major and minor pentatonic vocab that he's using to do the. So he's going from major to minor there, setting us up for this ridiculous line, which we'll see next. Here's the scales that Wes would have been thinking from when he was playing that particularly cool line there. It's the D major and the D minor pentatonic. So the last two bars, bars 11 and 12, we've got this ridiculous line, which is this. So bars 11 and 12 are particularly tricky just for their speed. What you want to make sure that you're doing is bringing out that top note. So you just want to lean really heavily on that top note as you play it, to make sure that it's coming out, because it is the melody line and it will cut through more than the lower frequencies. Now in this particular one, it's going to be one of those things that you're just going to have to practice if you're new to octaves and you're not up to speed yet. But there are some things that we can take away from this. And the first thing we can take away is what he's actually outlining, because it just sounds like a jumble of notes really, really fast. And just sounds, really highbrow. It's like, how am I ever going to get to that? And basically all he's doing is he's outlining a D7, a G7, and an A7. That's literally it. So he's playing... he's approaching the triad of D, something I've seen Martin Taylor do an awful lot as well, from a semitone below. So he approaches the third, which is F sharp, from a semitone below, and then the fifth, which is A, from a semitone below, and then the octave. And then in the next part, then he goes down a G7, so B, G, D, B, F. And I think what's really cool about this is Wes actually doesn't start using these arpeggios on the tonic, which is something that we can do when we're first starting to use chord tones, and when we're starting to do octaves. We'll always start on the root note, because we want to make sure that we're stating the tonality of that particular chord. And in this case, Wes doesn't do that. He goes on the third, because as I was saying earlier, the third is really important and it spells out the chord. It states whether it's a major or minor. So in this case, it's a major sounding chord. So he's using the major third. So and then he's putting the seventh at the end to show you that it's a dominant seventh chord. And then he's then spelling out an A7. So going from the C sharp and ending on an A there. So C sharp, B, through to B to A, and then C sharp, sliding up from C sharp to D, and then dropping down to a G to show you it's an A7, and then ending on the dominant note, which is an A, to bring you right back to the next chorus on D. So what he's doing there, it's really fast and it will take a bit of practice, but in terms of harmonically, it's not really out of this world. It's just very clever, in the fact that what you can take away from it is he's starting on the third to state what type of chord is it, whether it's a major or a minor chord. So what are our takeaways from this? The first thing to take away is your technique of octaves. Make sure that you're brushing with your right hand across all the strings and you're muting with your first and your fourth fingers to get rid of all of those open strings on there. The second thing, I think, is to make sure that you're using your thirds and sevenths to describe the chord when you're trying to solo, because they differentiate between major and minor. So if you've got a G7 chord and you want to differentiate whether it's a major or a minor, then you're going to want to use a B natural rather than a B flat, otherwise it's going to clash. The third thing is rhythmic displacement, just to make your melodies a bit more interesting and make them tense without having to use something that's harmonically tense. Then you can use rhythmic displacement, and that's basically where instead of putting your phrase inside 2 beats, you put your phrase inside something odd like a beat and a half, like Wes does, and then it takes a few bars to get back to beat 1 again and sit right again. So the last one is to learn your arpeggios and your scales laterally up the fretboard. That's going to come in really handy when you're playing octaves, because it's quite tricky, as you saw from that first bar, to play an octave phrase within a small area on the fretboard. It's a lot easier if you're going up the fretboard like that rather than like that. So make sure that you learn both in a small area and then also laterally up the fretboard. So I hope you get on well with that this week. I'm sorry it's short and sweet this week. Thanks again to all my patrons who support me, and to all of you guys who watch, like and subscribe. Remember to do that if you're new to this channel, so that you can get the next video. Next week we're going to be taking a look at the final chorus of the solo with some more octaves, and we're going to be looking at Wes's up and down thumb technique when he's playing octaves. And that's pretty cool and not as difficult as it sounds. So we'll get into that next week. Happy practicing, and as always, do drop me a message if anything on here you need explaining a bit more. Yeah, have a good week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.